Hello, everyone. This is Vincent Pacillo, host of the msuwma podcast. We have another amazing episode planned for you today. We recently hosted Khe Hy. Khe worked on Wall Street for 15 years and was one of the youngest managing directors at Blackrock. He then went on to create his own blog called RadReads, which he's the founder and CEO. And he started this blog helping people to ask life's biggest questions. And the blog and newsletter are read by 30,000 leaders each week across countless industries. He's also the creator of the 10K work method and the creator of Supercharger Productivity. In today's conversation, we talked about how he created his blog, what went into creating his blog, his career in finance, productivity, and so much more. So stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone, to the msuwma podcast. I'm here with Khe Hy. Khe, thank you for coming on today.
Vincent, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, and it's great to meet everyone.
Yeah, of course. So let's kind of get started with a little bit about your background. So how did you start out your career, and how did it progressively get to where you are today?
All right. So let's say I would start with just a very, very brief background. I'm from New York City. I was born in New York City, child of first-generation Cambodian immigrants. And so a lot of my story is shaped by the fact that we kind of grew up lower middle class. But the central thesis for my parents was get these kids, i.e. me and my sister, all the opportunity in the world, make all the sacrifices for them through education. So that my parents worked their butt off so that we could get good grades, go to good schools, and then, in theory, live a great life, right? Yeah. Kind of the theory was work, school, money, kind of happiness. That was kind of the playbook. And it's a very, very reasonable playbook. So I am a very diligent student. When someone gives me directions, I follow them. And so I was an quote unquote easy kid for my parents. And I just followed that playbook, right? I got good grades in high school. I did all the extracurriculars. It was a huge nerd. So not very cool. I didn't really like high school, but who does, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I went to college. I majored in computer science. I graduated college in 2001 from Yale. And then in 2001, banks were recruiting. They were like the biggest. This was before, just to put things in perspective, like Google barely had existed in 2001, right? There were no smartphones. There were definitely no smartphones. There were cell phones. And we transitioned from 28.8 modems to like T1 lines while I was in college. So it was a very different world back then. And so the main employers were banks and consulting firms, especially at kind of these like fancy Ivy League schools. Yeah. So I got sucked into that. They're like, you can make more money in your first year than your dad. They didn't say this, but this is what they implied, that, that your dad made like in his 30th year. And I'm like, who wouldn't want to do that, right? Isn't that part of the playbook? So I got roped into investment banking, mergers and acquisitions.
Nice.
I did that for a bit under 2 years and I didn't like it. And I changed jobs within finance. I kind of got off the analyst program. Mm-hmm. I then went into what was a smaller industry then called fund of hedge funds, where you kind of invest in lots of hedge funds on behalf of like an endowment or insurance company or sovereign wealth fund. And actually, that was a very sweet spot of my career. I did that for it's probably like 12-ish years.
Okay.
I had at 35 years old, I had, probably hopefully not a midlife, maybe like a third of a life crisis.
Yeah.
And I had decent success. I was one of the youngest managing directors at Blackrock. I managed a team. I had autonomy, made good money. And I was like, is this it?
Yeah.
I'm like going through the motions of life and work in a very, very, very privileged and comfortable and secure life going through. And I'm like, I can't do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That would be sad. It would be sad to myself. And so after some mulling over, I quit. I quit and I basically said, I'm going to take 2 years to figure out what I want to do, what makes me happy. So to my parents' dismay, like they kind of got me to the place the apex of where they wanted me to go.
Yeah.
And I was like, peace, I'm out. And so then I went on this kind of personal discovery journey of like, well, what makes me happy, and can I make that work, and what kind of life do I want to live? And there's a lot of paths to unfold there, so I'll let you unroll them, but unfurl them. But effectively, I started a blog, an email newsletter called RadReads, and that morphed into a bunch of different things like life coaching, money coaching, online webinars and workshops, and it's really kind of found its niche now with one of our flagship courses. So we teach a course on prioritization, goal setting, and time management called Supercharge Your Productivity, and that's the core of our business.
Very, very cool. So kind of going off of the Blackrock experience that you had, how did that work go over or transfer to the blog that you have now?
Zero.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's many layers to that question, right? Functionally, zero, right? I didn't have an audience. I didn't know how to write. I mean, I knew how to write, but I wasn't a writer. Right. I definitely didn't know social and, SEO and Google ads and, that kind of stuff. So none of the kind of top layer skills transferred over. But if you look below the surface, right, if you think of those top skills being like the tip of the iceberg, if you look below, there's like a massive, massive chunk of ice that submerged. There was a lot of things that transferred over, right? I mean, the first one was like my work ethic.
Yeah.
I read in a blog post or an email newsletter for 322 consecutive weeks, spanning 2 moves and 2 kids.
Yeah.
Right. I showed up every day or every week. So that was something that I was, quite regular. That was a skill or a personality trait of mine. So that was one. Another was being, good at building relationships.
Yeah.
Called networking. I don't really like the word networking because it feels so icky and transactional.
Totally.
But networking, building relationships with people who I was helping, who people could help me, mentor me. We could all kind of support each other, kind of finding your tribe.
Yeah.
That was something that really transferred over. A third one is, I guess, empathy. I know that sounds a little foo-foo-y, as my father-in-law would say. But, I pride myself on being a good listener and really kind of connecting with what people are trying to truly share. And I think that was one of my strengths as a manager. And so that transferred over as a writer, because I think the best, especially when you write in kind of first person, blogging type style, if the reader reads what you write and it's like, wow, it's like that person is in my head, or that this internet. I mean, I'm sure you've had that feeling when you've read something on the internet. You're like, this person gets me. Yeah. Right. So those were a handful of skills. There was also some other pragmatic skills. I was quite good at managing my own money. My cash flow my income is so volatile. And so I like things like budgeting, things like, estimating your taxes, investing in your kids, right? I was very diligent about that. I think I view money management and kind of the top of the iceberg, to go back to our analogy. But those were a few that come to mind.
That's awesome. And it's funny that you mentioned the networking thing, because I was just filming a podcast with someone that they don't like the term networking either. They like the term connection. And it's just one of those things where it's it's all about making connections, because networking feels transactional, exactly what you said. So how did you end up starting the blog? Walk us through that journey. How long did it take? How did you build your audience? All of that good stuff.
Well, it's still happening, so it's not done. When I quit Blackrock, I had this little newsletter. So this was 2015. And 6 months before I quit, I started this newsletter, not because I knew I was going to quit, but it was just something fun. And I love reading on the internet, just finding random articles about all different types of topics. And I would pick 5 and I would send them to my friends with a 3-sentence description of why I thought they should read them. Yeah. And, 7 years later, 6 years later, everyone has a newsletter now. So it's kind of, but back then it was much less common for people to have a personal newsletter. Right. And so I would send it, and especially a simple one like that, lots of people do that type of email newsletter now. It's kind of, Tim Ferriss does it, and James Clear does some version of it. And again, I stand on the shoulder of giants, but my friends liked it, and they're like, this is so cool. Are you going to do it again? I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of more like a one-off thing. I thought this was, and people kept saying like, can you do it again? So the thing that I realized is I liked finding the articles. I was going to read them anyway for myself.
Yeah.
And I like the practice of writing the 3-sentence blurb, because it kind of forced me to really crystallize, like, do I understand what's happening here?
Yeah.
Can I explain? I think one of the best tests of whether you understand something is if you can like communicate it effectively to someone else, especially if it's a complex topic that you can communicate in simple terms.
Yeah.
So I started that, and that people were like, keep doing that. And I didn't think it was a business. It was like a fun side project. But when I quit, I basically said, so when I quit, I had no plan. Like I literally had no plan. The only plan I had was my wife and I had looked at our bank account, and we had said, this is the amount of money we're comfortable going to zero for you to figure it out. And my wife's super cool, and she trusts me, and we were lucky we had saved some money. So it was like multiple years of 18 months to 2 years of money.
Gotcha.
And so then I'm just like, to go back to that work ethic point, it's like I didn't want to just like smoke weed and watch Netflix. Like I wanted to do stuff. I just didn't want to do Wall Street stuff. And so I was like, well, let's see what happens when I just do stuff, and maybe something will find me.
Yeah.
And so this newsletter became this little thing. It had 36 people the first time I sent it on like a Gmail BCC. Like it wasn't even on MailChimp or anything like that. I just sent this. I was like, okay, well, I could make this a little better. Like it needs a name. So found the name RadReads. It's like an homage to surf and skate culture. And the fact that I'm a kid from the 90s, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like,
yeah.
So I'm like, cool, like that's fun. But, that's actually, then I had to like go buy the domain. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, if people are going to sign up, like they need to like sign up. There needs to be a sign up form. So then I needed to learn how to make a sign up form.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, what colors should I use? Because like you maybe want the colors to be the same on your sign up form as your email. And then like, well, what fonts do it just kind of like kept like one thing kept leading to another. And it was I think this is something I really want to share with you and your listeners, is that it was very motivated by like a true sense of curiosity and ease. Like these things were just like finding me. And I spent like a week understanding the difference between like different fonts. And I'm not a designer. I never will be, but I'm like, this is kind of neat,
Yeah.
And that's what I started to realize about this kind of online business, was that every day that I was doing it, I had to like solve a different little like mini challenge, like some of the ones I described to you, like how do I buy a domain? Some were more technical, right? But some were more nuanced, which was like, I don't know, someone reached out to me and they're like, we want to sponsor your newsletter. So I was like, how much do I charge to them? Like, it turns out there's a giant economy of people who buy newsletter ads. I just wasn't privy to it, right? It wasn't my world. So I had to go learn about it. And I'm like using some of the relationship building. I'm like, hey, like you work at a media company. I'm like 99% smaller than you, but like, how would I think about pricing an ad? And they're like, oh, it's like 3 cents per subscriber. I'm like, oh, okay. 3 cents per subscriber. Well, like $300, right? Then you got to invoice someone. You're like, oh shit, do I have an invoicing system? Right? Like, so I really like, it's still happening now. Like just like as these new things were happening, I was just kind of launching myself into them. And I wouldn't say that all of them are fun, like paying your taxes and dealing with your accountant. Like it's not fun, but it's not fun.
Right.
But if something was really kind of bumping against me and it felt like laborious, I was just like, do I really need to do this? Like I actually did a podcast for a year, and like towards the end, I'm like, just kind of lost the magic, right?
Yeah.
So I stopped it. I think I didn't have a team to support me, so we could talk about that. So
yeah,
with every iteration, and then you just do that for 7 years, and like it's amazing how far it gets you. Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like compound interest, right?
Definitely. Most definitely. So you really ran like a one-man show for like just doing everything for like the vast majority of the time, correct?
Yeah, I'd say so. a year and a half ago, I hired a virtual assistant.
Nice. Okay.
So 5 years I was by myself. A year and a half ago, I hired a virtual assistant. I would say that in the past 2 years, I hire a lot of like one person shop consultants.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's so I hire a bunch of consultants, but oftentimes they don't do the work for you. They just show you how to do the work.
Right.
And then just on January 1st, I'm bringing on 2 full-time employees.
Very cool.
So we'll actually have a real company with like payroll and benefits and vacation policies and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So can you tell us a little bit more about, like, you mentioned the sponsorships, which is a perfect segue to this. What are like the sources of revenue for a blog like yours? It's like pretty virtual and stuff like that. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, and I mean, so I'll disclaim by saying that there are 1,000 different ways to do this. So let's zoom it out to first principles, right? You have an audience, right? You have people who care about what you have to say, and then you can monetize it through a few different types of ways, right? So one obvious way is through their attention, which is like advertising.
Sure.
I've dabbled with sponsorships, but that's a volume game. Like, it's really like, they don't really care that, like, smart people like Vincent read your newsletter. They're just like, show me the stats. Right. So it's a very cutthroat, almost like a machine like type business.
Sure.
And you have to be really big. So that would be, and then there's like more nuanced ways to do that. Like, the way Instagram influencers will do kind of paid sponsorships. Like there's different ways to do that, but you're basically monetizing attention. I've dabbled with that. I never did that because at the end of the day, it's a volume game, and that's a hard to game to play. Another way to monetize would be through selling time for money, selling services, right? So people read my blog and they're like, I really vibe with this guy. I wonder if he can coach me, or he can help my business, or come speak at my company offsite, or things like that. Right. So that starts to become a lot more lucrative, because depending on, your audience, your experience, who likes you, you can start to charge. I mean, like if you write a book and it's like, it does pretty well, like you could charge 15, 20 grand for a talk. Right.
Oh, gotcha.
But you gotta it takes like 4 years to write a book. So,
for sure.
So that would be another way. I dabbled with that. And for me, it was mostly through coaching. People found me and they're like, wow, okay. Like, I want to change jobs, and I've seen what you did, or I saw how you started this blog. And so they basically pay you per hour, per month, some kind of retainer, but you're basically trading time for money. And it's a very, very good life. The challenge with it is doesn't scale well. So like if I wanted to take 3 months off over the summer, then like I don't make money for 3 months in that model. The third way would be to monetize through kind of online digital, through products, right? And so you could have like standard products like merch, or, water bottles, or, hoodies, or things like that. Or you could have digital products, which have much lower friction in delivery. Right. Where like let's say I could create a course. I don't know, what's a passion project of yours? Like some random thing you're just like, you like to geek out to. Don't overthink it.
Something that I've always dabbled with is helping people buy cars, because I'm a big car person. So like I've worked in the dealership. I worked at several dealerships over the past few years. So one of my goals, I've actually done this before too, is I want to help people buy a car, like throughout the entire process, educate them, and like do everything for them pretty much, so that they can save time and money. So
perfect example. You're an expert, or a lot about this field. You're passionate about it. If you had an audience, chances are you're writing about cars because you're interested in it and you're good at it. You could do like Vincent's, buy your dream car tutorial. Right. And you can just pre-record, like simple, like just this webcam, whatever, series of videos, put them on some site like Gumroad. There's a bunch of like kind of paywall sites, and just be like $99. Right. So that's a digital product. And the beauty about digital products is, as I just shared in that example, it would be hard to create it, but it's not like impossible. The barriers to entry are quite low. The thing that would be challenging is if you don't have an audience, how will people find it? Right. I mean, that's like a classic problem for a business. Like, how will people find, if you have 50 Thai restaurants in LA, how will people find, the 51st Thai restaurant? Right.
Right.
It's very competitive. So, but digital products are nice because once you create that, they have a marginal cost, excuse me, of zero.
Yeah.
Right. You could sell that product to 10 people or to 1 million people, and it costs you the same. It costs you zero to deliver it to that millionth customer. So where we landed was we tried to do it that way. That model has its own challenges where it's it's hard. It's actually hard to deliver a good experience to people at a high price point, right? And then things like production quality and so on start to matter. So we found a hybrid between services and pre-recorded videos, or time for money and pre-recorded videos. We found this productivity course that we teach live every 4 months.
Yeah.
And we supplement it with a bunch of like digital stuff, like digital communities and pre-recorded videos and templates, things like that. We didn't invent this model. Like, lots of people have done this model for a while, but it really worked for us.
Yeah.
And so now we teach they call them today cohort-based courses. So like, we open our next cohort, version 9 on January 20th. And so you'll come in, you'll have like 2 weeks to sign up to buy the course. And then we take you through a 5-week course. We do all this stuff. And then the course ends and you get to keep all these resources. And there's all these support groups. And, we charge like thousands of dollars for that.
Yeah.
So we don't need to sell, the first example was like competing for attention. We don't need to sell to millions. If we're selling $1,000 product, we could sell it to 100 people. And that's a pretty good business right there.
Yeah.
So that's where we landed. And that's the current business model right now. But, the cool thing about small, nimble, self-funded, right? This is all funded from our own profitability,
right?
Is that we're not beholden to any investors. We can kind of pivot quite quickly if, COVID, Omicron, whatever, like we can like really change things up quite quickly than like, Goldman Sachs or something.
Yeah, definitely. So perfect segue into the next question. So your blog is based on productivity, correct?
Yeah. It's a little bit more nuanced, but yeah, that's a fair starting point.
Yeah. So what makes productivity for you so important, and like what are like the kind of key principles that you teach your audience about it?
Yeah. Okay. So I'd say productivity, I can answer that in 2 parts. Like, why is it so important? And how does it, how do you teach your audience how to do it? So the first part, why is it important? Productivity has, it's really like, it's really a very, it's kind of a false placeholder for a lot of things, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because everyone wants to be more productive. But if I ask you, Vincent, why do you want to be more productive? Like, really?
Yeah.
Why do you want to be more productive? What would you tell me?
So I can get more stuff done in a shorter period of time.
But I push you a step further. If you got more stuff done in a shorter period of time, why is that important? Like, what would happen?
I would have more time. I'd have more time to do like stuff that I want, like in my free time or something like that. Yeah.
So you'd have more free time, right?
Yeah. Right.
Got it. And so there's another question. It's like, well, why don't you have free time now?
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah. Because I'm not managing my schedule as well as I could have. That's definitely something for me personally.
So it's kind of like, it's funny. It's like, and you could take it a step further. Like, what's the importance of free time? And, you might say like, free time makes me happy, or free time makes me a better friend or spouse or partner. And then you can kind of see, like, let's just say free time makes you a better parent. That's a very common one. Then you're like, you want to be more productive to be a better parent. Like, by the way, there's a lot of ways you can be a better parent without like better time management, right? Like, you could be more present around them. You could be less angry when they make a mistake. You could make certain sacrifices like that you don't love to make, right? Like, if it's like 5 French fries left and you're still hungry, you could be like, hey kid, you have the 5 French fries. I know that your happiness is more important than my happiness, right? So it's funny. So you start with this question of like productivity, but downstream, some bigger life questions. So so we really, our course is really, that's why when you said it, you write about productivity, it's like, yes, but, or yes, and
right.
We really go like 2 or 3 layers deeper, the desire to be more productive, because that can become a prickly question. You know, some people land on like the fear of death, like there's not enough time. It's like, we're gonna die soon. Like some people land like there's scarcity mindset, like, you know, the next shoe's gonna drop, so I need to like hoard, you know, things, hoard degrees, hoard money. So that's why productivity is important to me. And you could actually do this with like careers. You could be like, well, why is a career important? People are like, oh, because I want to make money. It's like, well, why is it important to make money? It's like, because I want to be a good, he's gonna come back, I want to be a good dad, right? And you'd be like, is making money and being a good dad directly correlated? You're like, the argument starts to weaken a little bit. And what our blog does is really push people and be like, okay, like, careful to just like try to squeeze out 5 more minutes out of the day. Like, if you really want to be a better dad, like there's a whole new landscape of like being a better dad. So in terms of how we encourage, I mean, we spend so much time teaching this, but I would say that the biggest thing that we do is we try to get people to look for impact in what they do, to find like leverage. Like, you guys are financial oriented. Correct. So find leverage in what they do. So for example, like you might, simple example, networking example, someone might, your car thing, like people say, like your friends probably say like, hey, I want to buy a car. Like, should I go to a dealer or should I go to CarMax? Or like, should I put more money down on a lease or less money down? Or should I buy and finance it? Like, they probably ask you all these questions.
Yep.
A simple way to get leverage would be, what if you wrote a Google Doc that's like Vincent's FAQ on new car buying? Yeah. You just wrote a Google Doc, and all you did was take the questions that people have asked you about the years, over the years, plus the questions that you might encourage them to ask themselves. Right. And anytime someone asks you that question, you just send them the Google Doc. Yeah. Think of the leverage there, right? And you'd be delivering them a better experience, right? Because it's more thorough than you just like riffing, like, yeah, today I feel like this is the right tip, and you know, yesterday I felt like this is the right tip. You'd be doing it in a way that is like more organized, right? So you actually spend a little time organizing your ideas, and you'd be doing it in a way that is way more scalable, because you, in theory, like if they weren't your friends, they were your acquaintances, like you wouldn't have 30 minutes to get on the phone with each of them. You could be like, you know, I can't speak to you for 30 minutes right now, but I actually have this guide for you that you should check out. And if you have any questions, like I'll have you to email them, right? Yeah. So that's a very, very simple, like, leverage. That's a little like piece of leverage right there. Yeah. And you could find that anywhere, right? You could find that in, the way you tell your story, right? Like the way that I introduce myself, or you could find that in the way that you, a graphic that you might use to describe, you know, your business, or you might find that in culture, right? Like Amazon's very good. They repeat the same words over and over. He always says, it's day one, it's day one, it's day one. That's leverage, right? Because people are like, it's like 100,000 person company, and they're like, we got to run like a startup, right? Think about the leverage in the phrase, it's day one, which Jeff Bezos says over and over again. So if you just learn to find these like amplifying forces throughout all your activities, or as many of them as you can, you just amplify yourself. And then all these other things that you want, being a better dad, having more free time, being happier, then you'll have more space for that. Yeah. Awesome. Great stuff. Well, Khe, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate your time. Oh, my pleasure, Vincent. This has been awesome. And thank you to all your listeners for hearing my story. Of course. Of course.
If you like what you just heard, please like, comment, and share. This is Lance Mullen, producer of the MSU WMA podcast. MSU WMA, or Michigan State University Wealth Management Association, is a student organization part of the Eli Broad College of Business, located in East Lansing, Michigan. Our mission is to inspire and educate the next generation of financial planners. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed, please check out our channel on all platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and check out our social media at MSU WMA and msuwma.com.